Welcome. My name is Bev Pierce with RI Realtors. We'd like to thank you for joining us today for our 2024 legislative update. I would like to introduce Monica Staaf, General Counsel with RI Realtors, who will moderate our session and introduce our panelists. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you, Bev. Good morning, everyone. And in case any of you have not taken a class taught by Bev, she's an excellent instructor, and she makes us look good because she organizes these webinars all behind the scenes. So thank you, Bev. So I have the privilege of introducing a woman who needs no introduction, and that is Sally Hersey, the president of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors. I just want to say one quick thing about Sally. I'd say every year we have a president, there's usually some curveball that comes up during that person's administration. And boy, does Sally have a monstrous curveball, the antitrust settlement agreements, that she's been really doing a great job keeping our spirits up and leading us. So thank you, Sally. Please go right ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Monica, and good morning, everyone. I asked to actually speak to all of you because I think it's important that right now you understand, and I wanted to talk to you as a member, that as Monica said, every year or every decade, we've seen some big changes and challenges in real estate. But look what happened. It's 2024. We survived. We're here and we're just fine. A lot of people are feeling very anxious. They keep getting the August date thrown at them via email, via multiple things you're seeing, multiple sources of media, social media, and it gets a little overwhelming and can cause anxiety. Don't be nervous because we got this. And I can say that from a point of a surety that knowing the staff that you have behind you, the leadership team is here for you. We have myself, Christopher Witten, Michael Pereira, Bill Fain, and Alex Parmenides. So if you need any of us, please reach out. But we're going to go through these changes and these upcoming challenges, and we're going to be just fine. So take a deep breath, because just know that many people have been working for months behind the scenes to make sure that when this transition happens, you have everything that you need to be successful. And if you have questions, we're here to answer them. And you've got Forms Committee, you've got Government Affairs, which you're going to hear Susan Martins-Phipps chatting a little bit about. So many of you are not aware of the different levels that happen behind the scenes, but I just wanted to be here to tell you that they are there, and we are your village. You've heard me speak about the village of support. You have got the biggest village in this going forward, and you are not alone. So I'm going to just touch on a couple of other things that I think that we can do. Bev is going to be putting up some dates for you. Excuse me. There's going to be a couple of drop-ins coming up with Monica and John Bro. So if you haven't had an opportunity to do that, they're coming up, and the dates and the information will be coming out to you. I'd be negligent if I didn't speak to you for a moment also about the legislative issues that we've been dealing with. They keep saying storm the hill. We went to DC, we went to our state house, we had a fantastic showing, and our senators and representatives actually listened, and we got a lot of great work accomplished, which Susan was going to talk further on that. There's some issues that are still on the table, even though the session is over, that you're going to be hearing about with the independent contractor status, the electrician's bill, which you've probably gotten the calls for action for several times. There was talk about sellers having to do radon, which did not pass this year, first-time home buyer initiatives that are happening. So there's a lot of things that are coming on the plate, and just be aware of them. And there's ways that you can help. If you haven't already, please sign up for the Realtor Party mobile alerts. They're not going to inundate you with a bunch of useless text. They are going to be very pointed and things that will keep you informed and up to the minute. So all of us that have that quick second to read, it's a very easy thing to do, and I would highly recommend it. If you can go a little bit further, please talk to or write to your senators and representatives. When an issue comes up, let them know the Rhode Island Association of Realtors standpoint. We are here to protect the rights of you as our members, but also obviously as homeownership and our clients, our buyers and sellers. we heard very often this session how impactful we were by sending all the emails and really making the calls and showing up in person. And if you're comfortable doing that, there's ways that you can provide testimony, either written or in person. We heard directly from them that we made a difference. There's a lot of unintended consequences sometimes that can occur as a result of some of these bills that our legislators are not aware of. And by us going in and making them aware, changes happen, like the VA getting left out because of the settlement, not being able to bring funds to the table. Within a matter of a couple of weeks, that was corrected before the settlement takes place. And now our VA buyers are protected. So that's just one small example. So really important with elections coming up that you find out who supports housing initiatives. And most importantly, let's get out and vote, because you can make a difference. Again, please, everyone, just know that I know next month seems like a scary topics on the agenda, but they really aren't. Things are going to be a little bit different. But we are here with all the resources by phone, by email, by webinars. We're inundating you with sources of information that you have at your fingertips. Just take a few minutes to find out. And of course, reach out if we can help. I'm going to turn it back over to Monica, and they're going to get going with some of our legislative updates. Thanks for your time and enjoy the beautiful day.
Thank you so much, Sally, and you enjoyed the day. We really appreciate your leadership, and I'm sure everyone tuning in will as well.
Thank you, Monica.
Well, I've got another woman who probably needs no introduction. Susan Martins-Phipps is the chair of the RI Government Affairs Committee. She and the other members of the committee volunteer their time and do things like speak to members of Congress, go to the State House, as Sally was just talking about, with the help of our Government Affairs Director. So today, my role, you'll be happy to know, I'm not going to be talking about antitrust issues or what's happening on August 14th. I told Susan my role is going to be her sassy sidekick as she walks us through legislative updates and all the work of the Government Affairs Committee. I'll chime in a few spots or if you have questions about how some of the legislation is turned into law. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Susan Martins-Phipps. Susan, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Sally, for your great leadership. We've been working super hard this session. Session starts right after the new year, and it usually goes till around the end of June. And we've been at the State House quite often this year. Just to give you an idea how the Government Affairs Committee works is we meet every 2 weeks in person at RIR. And then during the week, we talk with each other via emails, and we also often have Zoom calls too if there's an emergency. We have members from every board. We have all of the FPCs, which is the Federal Policy Coordinators, that are assigned to each of our members of Congress in terms of Senator Reid, Senator Whitehouse, and the other two representatives. They're also on the committee, as well as the head of the chair of the RPAC trustees. So we have a great staff. We've asked them all to submit comments and also appear in the State House. So almost every week we had one of our members there at the State House meeting people and talking to them. What we do is David Salvatore was our VP of Public Affairs. He recently took a new job with Providence Foundation, but he had done an awesome job. We were extremely well represented by him. He was very well respected. He had been the former chair of the Providence City Council. He was respected for his knowledge, his fairness, super calm, but he had super sharp elbows when he needed to be. So we were very well respected because of David. I would like to introduce our new advocacy manager, whose name is Trevor Chase. He comes to us from the Realtor Association of Southeastern Massachusetts in New Bedford. He was their public policy coordinator. He's finishing up his master's degree in public policy from UMass Dartmouth, and we can't wait to start working with him. So he's hitting the ground running, and hopefully we'll have a great year like we did last year. What happens when a bill comes forward? Our lobbyists, which was David and Lynette, would tell us that this is a bill that needs some attention from us. And there are different categories. Some were tenant relations, radon, electrician's bills, those kinds of things. And what we would do as a committee is read the bill and talk about how we look at it and if is it important to us, and then we would rank it. So the ranking system went from 1 to 5. 1, we strongly support it. And when we strongly support a bill, we submit oral and written testimony. We do media outreaches. We do calls to action. I think we did 4 calls to action this year, this session. And I'm sure that some of you have seen that. And hopefully when you get a call to action, you do act on it. And then we call legislatures. The second on the ranking system is that we support a bill. We'll submit oral and written testimony if needed. And basically, we inform the legislators where we stand on the bill, that we support it. And if they need our help, to call us. The third rank is that we monitor it. You know, we're interested in it, but we don't, we're just keeping track of it. And our staff members will keep us informed as to what's going on. 4, we oppose the bill, and usually we will submit written testimony of why we oppose it, and inform the legislators that it's on our radar. And then number 5 is we strongly oppose. And when we strongly oppose, that's when we get our ranks and we go to the State House and we bring as many members as we can, and we basically talk to the legislators and say why we are opposing it, give them background history as to why, as Monica said, some unintended consequences that could come as a result of that. So I'd like to thank the committee, first of all of the members, because it is a lot of time. This is one of the committees that just spends a lot of time with each other and at the State House. So again, thank you for that committee. So without further ado, let me get into some of the bills that we've discussed this year. There were over 250 bills that we were monitoring. And like I said, some of them we were monitoring them very closely, and some of them they were just on our radar. But one of the most important things that passed this year, and I'm sure you've seen it written up about, was the Speaker's housing package. Joe Sicarci, who's the Speaker of the House, who happens to be my representative, was very forward in asking us for our help and our support for these bills. Some of the bills we were able to get behind 100%, and we were doing whatever we could to help them with it. Some of them we sort of stayed silent on. But just to go over some of the bills, there were 14 bills that were ultimately passed. The important ones for our industry, there was an ADU bill, and basically it says that this legislation that passed would provide homeowners statewide the right to develop a single ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, on an owner-occupied property. So you could do this by right if there was a disabled family member, or if you had an existing footprint of the structure on a lot that was larger than 20,000 square feet, or let's see, what was the other one? Oh, and obviously all of it had to, the design had to satisfy the building code, size limits, and infrastructure requirements. So that's really important. And Representative Sicarci has been pushing this bill for a number of years. We've been working with him on it. The second bill that got passed with this housing package was the manufactured homes. That manufactured homes are by right in every town an alternative option to stick-built homes. And I don't know if some of you in your towns, in your areas, manufactured homes were kind of poo-pooed. You know, these are the homes that come, they're manufactured off-site and they come in pieces, not mobile homes. These are manufactured homes. And in some of our towns and cities, there was some pushback from the zoning and the building departments. So now legislation has been passed that says manufactured homes by right are allowed. Another bill enabled legislation to give municipalities the authority to combine the zoning and planning boards. One of the things that the Speaker wanted to do is try to lessen the burden of building. If anyone has tried any project in any part of the state, it's difficult. It's difficult to go through planning, it's difficult to go through zoning, and half the times you have to go back to planning. So he would like to combine zoning and planning when necessary. And this is enabling legislation. So if the cities and towns want to do that, they can. The fourth bill is to codify the existing structure of the state building code. Again, if you've ever done any building, you know, each town and each city has their own thing, and then the state code comes in. So he really wants to codify a building code for the entire state. The fifth one was to allow electronic building permits. Again, this sounds like it should have been done years ago, but building permits should be done electronically. The sixth legislation is to enable the Rhode Island educational system to offer degrees or certifications to provide a supply of planners, planning technicians, staff, and to report back. So this is a committee to study this. Again, there's not enough planners. If you go to any of the towns, again, it takes a long time to get attention. It gets a long time to get anyone to talk to you because there's just not enough people working in the field. Let's see, the seventh one is a statute to require the municipalities to have an inventory of their abandoned properties. If you drive through any of the towns and cities, you see so many abandoned properties. And when we have such a large shortage of housing, the question is, why aren't these buildings being utilized? So an inventory, they're encouraging that every town has an inventory. And also it enables give priority to buyers who are willing to add deed restrictions that designate the property as low or moderate income housing. Again, specifically to target our shortage. The eighth bill is a subdivision of land reviews. That's basically dealing with vacant land. And the others, let me see if there's anything other critical. Mobile homes can qualify as affordable housing. Each town and city has to have a minimum number of affordable housing, and they weren't counting mobile homes as part of that. And a lot of the towns and cities have communities of mobile homes that qualify, or at least have been being used as affordable housing. So that's now can qualify as affordable housing. And the other one is to create a GSI, which is the Geographic Information System, to create a committee to see if that would work in Rhode Island. So that was this housing package. We spoke in favor of a number of those. And again, it's one of those things when you're dealing with politics, it's, you help them, they help us. So Senator Sakachi was not shy in asking for our help, and we were not shy in asking for his help. So it was a good symbiotic relationship. So that was the housing package. The next thing I want to talk about is the tenant landlord bills. Now, I think, Bev, I don't know if you can put up the legislative tracker now. Can you share a screen just to show how that's done? And if not,
did you want me to share the screen? I can do that.
yeah, I just want to show them the legislative tracker if that's possible. So while she's doing that, I'll start talking about the tenant landlord bills because we have a lot of things to talk about. These are important because this is going to affect our business. One of the first one that's the most important is the rent notification. This is effective immediately. Okay, so this is how you get to the legislative tracker. It's through that website, as you can see. And this is how you see it. The bill is there. If you tap on that bill number like H7015. Actually, why don't you tap on that one? That would be a good one. So before I go into tenant landlord, since this bill is up, let's talk about the electrician's bill. This was our biggest fail this year. We knew that this was coming. This was a very political bill. The president of the Senate really wanted it. And usually when the leadership wants something, they're going to get it. Most of the legislators we had spoken with, thought this was a terrible bill. And basically what this bill does, it clarifies the type of electrical services that require an electrician's contracting license. So as you use home inspectors. The home inspectors go in, they take the panel off the electrical meter, they make sure everything's connected right. They would test the GFI circuits. They do all that as part of their home inspection job. This precludes them from doing that. So the home inspectors, because of this law, will not be able to take a look at your electrical at all. They can't remove anything. They can't make sure you have a GFI circuit that works. What this bill says is that you have to hire an electrician if you want an electrical inspection. Again, we thought this was a very bad bill. Everyone we spoke to thought this was a very bad bill, very political bill. When you go on there's a website called legiscan.com. And when you go onto Legiscan, it's legiscan.com. You can type in the number of the bill. This one's 7015. And it gives you the summary of the bill. It tells you who the sponsors are. It tells you what the legislative action has been. When you go onto this bill, there were on the House side, there were 8 sponsors and it went through the House first. And then scheduled for hearings. After it passed the House, it went to the Senate. Every single person we spoke to said this was a bad bill. However, It passed the Senate 31-6, and it passed the House 72-2. So sometimes you just have a bill that's going to pass no matter what, and you try to do everything that you can. I think we spoke on this bill. We went to the State House, every hearing that they had. We had 2 to 3 realtors speaking on it. The home inspectors had their lobbyists speaking on it. This was just one of the ones that you just, at the end of the session, you wanted to throw up your hands and say, really? This is crazy. But anyway, this is one that we're going to be working on next session. We're starting right now. This summer, we're contacting all the sponsors saying, again, we understand part of this bill, but we would like a carve out for the home inspectors because we need to get the electrical services inspected through the home inspector. It's going to be very difficult and very costly to get an actual electrician to go in there and do that testing. So this is one of the ones we're working on. I encourage you to go onto this website, legiscan.com, take a look at who sponsored it, take a look at who signed up on it, and there you go. And if you can, there's one that says, let's see, bill tracking. If you go to bill tracking, can you press on bill tracking for a second? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find it.
And then on the bill number on the left-hand side, it's 7015. Go to the left again, the upper left, and see where it says bill number. I'll go to Rhode Island first of all. And then 7015, and then search that. So as you can see, it passed on June 24th. It took the entire session for them to finally pass it. This was one that the governor did not have to sign. It would have been passed down unless he wanted to veto it, but he signed it, which lots of times he doesn't sign if he doesn't agree with the bill. See all those sponsors, if anyone is in those districts, if you contact them and ask them, why that this was passed and why it was sponsored. And lots of times, the legislators will sponsor a bill because it's, you sponsor mine, I'll sponsor your kind of thing. But this is the one, like I say, this was our biggest fail. All right, if you can go back to the legislative tracker. And I'll start talking about the tenant landlord bills. So one bill that's going to be effective immediately is the rent notification. This is bill number 7304. And again, we don't have to, I just want to show you the tracker so that you know how to look at it. And when you hit on the numbers, you'll pick up the whole bill. But you can get out of that if you'd like. So the rent notification bill, effective immediately, notice of rental increase must be given in writing to any tenant by a landlord at least 60 days in advance. It was previously 30 days, so now we're from 30 to 60 days. For tenants that are younger than 62, if your tenant is older than 62 years old, you have to give them 120 days notice that the rent's going to be increased. So this is effective immediately. If any of your clients or if you guys have any rentals and you want to raise the rent, 60-day notice for under 62 years of age and 120 days. That's 4 months. It's a long time over 62. The second landlord bill that we need to to think about, it's called the post-death rental grace period. And this is also effective immediately. If a tenant dies during the term of the lease, the deceased family, living caretaker, anyone who's been living in the house that's at least 18 years of age has the right by law to stay there for 3 months, at least 3 months. So they need to be able to finish out the terms of the lease, and obviously they have to pay for it as what the rent was. So they have to abide by all of the terms of the original lease. They also must have to prove that they were living there, and there's a whole list of the ways they can prove it. So again, effective immediately. The third one is the mandatory fee disclosure. This is effective January 1st, 2025. And basically, landlords can no longer charge a convenience fee for rental payment. So if you're getting your rental fees paid by American Express and you want to charge them a 1.5%, whatever that is, you can no longer do that. Any fees beyond the rent must be disclosed in writing if there's a lease, and also in writing if it's a tenant at will. So any changes to fees must be disclosed. Utility costs must be disclosed. And basically in the lease, utility, who's responsible for paying the electric, whatever other utility costs. If there's any rental insurance fee that you're requiring, that also must be disclosed. If the landlord fails to comply, the tenant will recover any fees that were not disclosed. The fourth one, which is one that we tried to work on, is the rental registry. This is effective September 1st, 2024. And this law passed last year requiring all landlords with units built prior to 1978 to register their units and provide a lead certificate issued by a Rhode Island licensed lead inspector. The registration is with the Department of Health. Landlords can incur fees, fines, or be prevented from evicting tenants for non-payment of rent until they obtain a lead cert and register their units. The problem with this is we tried to push it back to September 1st of 2025. Currently, there are 35 active lead inspectors in the state. And what we're saying now is every single rental unit built prior to 78 has to have a lead inspection, which was prior to the law. That was the law. But now it has to be registered with the Department of Health. I was just trying to get a lead inspector for a house that we're renting, and good luck. Which is why we wanted to push back a year. We were not successful in pushing it back a year. So again, very important for our industry. Another law that was passed, this was a good law, and this is one that we were supporting. It allows the maximum number of unrelated persons living together would not be less than one person per bedroom. Some of the towns and cities had, there was a maximum of 4 unrelated people that were able to live in any house, which was ridiculous if the house had like 6 bedrooms, for example. So what this law says is if you have 6 bedrooms, you can have 6 renters. If you have 10 bedrooms, you can have 10 renters. So that was a decent law that passed. As an aside, and Monica, you might want to talk about this, about the new landlord tenant handbook that's coming out.
Yes, actually the Rhode Island is, and actually a couple comments to chime in on the rentals. And, but thank you, Susan. You're really covering a lot of territory, which is fantastic. Yeah, so the landlord tenant handbook, I can't tell you how many questions I've gotten from members about what's going on with that. If you've never used it before, the landlord tenant handbook was one that was put out by the state of Rhode Island a number of years ago. I don't think it has been updated, and it goes through what's in the Landlord Tenant Act, kind of gives tips for landlords and tenants, what deadlines, sample forms, all those things. It hasn't been updated since, I want to say, 2007 or 2008, and not through lack of badgering on our part. So finally, I got the idea of why not file legislation to require the state to update it every 2 years. So just double checked yesterday, there will be a final updated new version in place by the end of this year. And they're also looking at translating it into Spanish, which is what they're doing right now. So that was a good update we just got earlier this week. And then Susan, if I could also mention all the updates that Susan just talked about as far as rentals go. I work with the Forms Committee, which are also volunteers at the Realtor Association. And so just yesterday, we're meeting to update the lease, the residential lease, to make sure that everything will be in compliance. And one thing Susan was mentioning about when a bill goes into effect, the annoying one is like the electrician's bill. We just had a question in Q&A about when the electrician's bill goes into effect. And
that bill is going into effect January 30th, 2025. So what we're hoping to do, and again, our committee doesn't stop working when the session ends. This fall, we hope to be contacting all of those people who sponsored that bill to see if we can get a carve out for the home inspectors. We've been working with the home inspectors as well, just to see if the home inspectors can actually do their job and what they're supposed to be doing. They're trained to do that. They're trained to open up the electrical panel and to take a look at it and to test the outlets. So they've been trained to do that. They're licensed to do that by state law. Their home inspectors are now licensed. So hopefully we're going to be able to get a carve out before the 25th of January of next year.
Yes. We also have a question about when will the Department of Health registration for rentals be up and running? I can answer that unless you want to take that one.
Oh, no, you can take that one.
Okay. The answer, I want to say it depends, because that's a nice lawyerly answer to give. No, on a serious note, as Susan said, that public registry was supposed to be up and running by September 1st, and then landlords would have until October 1st to register their properties. I've been back and I started contacting the Department of Health in June while the legislature was still in session saying, okay, since the governor's attempt to postpone that for a year didn't pass, are you going to be ready for September 1st? What are we telling our members? So after going back and forth and kind of badgering them more times, they probably want to hear from me. The answer is that the Department of Health just received funding to create the public database on July 1st, the start of the new fiscal year. There are two parts of the law that contradict each other. One says this registry is supposed to be in place by September 1st. The other says they have until 9 months after they've been funded to create it. So I'd say realistically speaking, we're looking at some time in 2025. If it's earlier than that, we'll be surprised, but you never know. So I think one of the questions in the meantime is, so what do we do? Because there are penalties in place currently. There are penalties for landlords who don't register. There currently is a registration system that's been up and running for a number of years with the Department of Health. The difference is, though, who enters the information. And Susan, I know you're a former lead inspector, so if you want to chime in on any of this, but the current system, I just confirmed that again with the Department of Health, is that if a landlord has a lead inspection done for properties built, rental units built before 1978, then the inspector is the one who uploads those certificates into the system with the Department of Health, rather than you're entering that information.
That's correct.
Oh, yay. Phew. Good. So it's nice to have a lead inspector. And by the way, I'm only half joking about this. I've mentioned this at a couple of presentations on other topics recently, that I tell you, with only 35 lead inspectors in the state, there used to be many more, but the law really wasn't enforced. I don't want to say at all, but it was minimally enforced. There weren't many teeth in it at the time. So a lot of those lead inspectors got out of the profession altogether. If anyone's looking for a side gig, might be a good one to get in on, because they're right now, there's certainly a backlog with all the lead inspectors. So to answer the person's question, my best guess sometime in 2025, does that mean that you can tell landlords, phew, let's do nothing in the meantime? No, you should be getting the certificates now, because if you can affect the ability to evict a tenant, tenant can put their rent in escrow even now with the district court. Most tenants aren't doing that, or probably don't know about it yet. But there really are penalties currently in effect that have nothing to do with the registration system. The registration system, the public one, only makes it easier for someone to kind of catch you, for lack of a better word, because anyone would be able to search that database. Where now you can look at it, but it's not as easy to navigate as the public one. So I'm talking enough already, so I'm going to go back to you, Susan. And let me see, I think we have a few questions in the Q&A. So let's jump, okay, let me jump to one for you, and then I can do the next one unless you want to. There's a question from Nancy about the question is about when you talked about the law regarding the number of unrelated people. It is my understanding that local towns can set the maximum at 5 if the house has 5 or more bedrooms. Is that correct?
So that has been correct. We're going to see how this law works, if they're going to be able to supersede that. I know Narragansett has had lots of talk this past session too. So we'll keep you informed on that. This was one of the reasons that this law passed, was because there were so many. Providence was doing it, the number of unrelated, especially near the universities. So we'll see how this ends up shaking out. And again, this is the problem with legislation. I mean, they pass the bills and they don't always have the staffing, or they're not able to enforce it right away. So we'll keep you informed on that one.
And I think for a quick example of staffing, I don't know if people remember, but I mean, it was more than 20 years ago that the home inspector licensing law went into effect. It wasn't enforced for pretty close to 20 years before they actually got the funding for it. So It's not the first time these happen. The other thing, just quickly on the rental, then we'll go back to the Q&A, is, or Susan's presentation, either one. Well, actually, you know what we'll do? I know what I wanted to say. Just with some of the laws, like when Susan was going through the rental laws, some of the laws, like the electrician's bill, that goes into effect next year, as Susan talked about. So you've got time to prepare for it either way. Some of these laws go into effect, a lot of them, probably most, go into effect upon passage. Susan, if you want to mention what that means, because that's why we kind of feel like we're scrambling to
So, and as I go through these bills, I'll tell you when they're going to be effective. Some of them, especially if there's going to be some other requirements that have to be done, things that have to be put into place, they give it some time, but most of the time frames are arbitrary. But a lot of these are effective immediately, and that's why we want you to know some of these because they're going to affect our business. So as we go through the laws, I'll tell you which ones are effective immediately and which ones are going until January or September. But most of them are, as Monica said, effective immediately.
We have one other quick question, and that's something we were just talking about, and then I think you're ready to move on, Susan. So this question is, does the lead paint certification requirement apply to weekly lead vacation rentals?
So I did see that. I'm going to check on that. If you want to send me something, I can get back to you. Put it in the chat, your information or whoever it was, and I'll get back to you on that. Because I know that there was a conversation. I can't remember how it ended on that, but I will check that out.
It's 100 days or less. But as far as the registration with the registry, I don't know the answer to that one either. But as far as getting certificates, if you're renting the property for a rental of 100 days or less per year, it's a seasonal rental, then no.
And short-term rentals are supposed to be also registered. So I'm not sure how that works either, but okay, thank you for that.
Right. No, thank you for clarifying that piece of it. I'll
Excuse me.
help the Department of Health on that.
Yeah.
Couple more lead questions, and I don't know if you want to take a few more, Susan, or if you want to go back to those, whatever you feel comfortable with. I don't know.
With questions, or I don't always have all the questions up. Let me see.
A couple more lead ones. I don't know if you want to.
Why don't you read them to me? Because I can't quite see them right now.
Okay, one of them is, and I'll put this link in the chat. One of them is there a list of lead inspectors? Yes, that's on the Rhode Island Department of Health website. I'm sorry, I'm answering. I should have asked you.
No,
Susan.
no, go for
I
it.
know the answer to this. I'll look up the link while Susan's talking, and I'll put that in our chat here. But
Yep.
yes, there definitely is one. And then the other one is, it would be helpful if RIAR would create an update sheet on the lead certification rules that we can share with landlords.
Yes.
So
That's something definitely we have to do. It's a moving target all the time. So, but an update would be good. I think it's a great idea.
I'm going to put two links in the I'll look while Susan's continuing to talk, but I'll put a couple of links in the chat. But they're both on the Rhode Island Rhode Island Department of Health website. One is a list of licensed inspectors. The other is the Department of Health put out last summer, actually after badgering from us. They might have been going to do it anyway, but there's a one-pager that you can hand out for landlords. It's really I think it's really a well-done form. It talks about some of the exemptions we're talking about, and it's a really nice resource. So that way you're not the bearer of bad news. It's coming from the state. So I'll quit talking and go back to Susan.
Yeah, the Department of Health does have lots of resources for lead safety. So if you go on that or direct your clients to go on that, it is it's pretty well done. Just in terms of successes, some landlord tenant bills that did not pass that we're excited about. There was a bill that was introduced limiting the amount of rental increase at 4% annually, that you could only raise the rent 4%. And then there was another bill that you could only raise it up to 10%. Both of those failed. There was another legislation prohibiting landlords from inquiring about the an applicant renter prior incarceration. So they didn't want us to ask if the prior tenant had any incarceration, had been in jail at any point. That failed. They also wanted to impose a 5% tax on every rental of a house or condominium. That did not pass. That failed. They wanted mandatory radon testing on residential rentals every 5 years. That failed. And they also, this one was crazy, would require that landlords pay interest on security deposits. So those all failed. We consider those successes because they failed. The next one I want to talk about is the Shoreline Access Bill. There was an original bill that passed last year, the original Shoreline Access, which basically said that you had access, there was a public right to access 10 feet from the high water mark inward. The bill that passed this year, that's effective immediately, requires written acknowledgement from any buyer of an oceanfront or shoreline property that they have been informed of the public's right and privileges of the shore. So that information has to come from the seller. So what we need to do is have disclosed that any seller of waterfront, water view, anything related to the water has to inform the buyer of an oceanfront property. Monica, you might want to take this because I know you've been working really hard on the disclosure.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I just put one of the links in chat about the resources for landlords. And there's an English version and there's a Spanish version. So those, you should see those in chat. We'll make sure that I just said that twice. Anyway, talking too much. Okay, let's go back to what Susan was just talking about. One of the things, in addition to what Susan was just saying, and I'll show you what the Forms Committee has completed. You might have heard earlier this week that there was a court decision about the shoreline access, and a lower court judge found that that the law was unconstitutional about letting people walk on the beach up to the 10-foot line. So at this point, the Attorney General's office is saying he plans to defend the right of Rhode Islanders and visitors to Rhode Island to walk on the beach freely, regardless of who owns the beach. But so stay tuned on that one. But the important thing is it doesn't affect the law that Susan was just telling you about with the sales disclosure. So let me see if I can share my screen here for a sec, and I'll show you the Forms Committee what did I do with it now?
The other thing too is they
ready to show.
they wanted a separate disclosure, and we were able to talk them into or have them agree that it be on our disclosure that we already currently have. So this is what Monica's been working on, to add something to our current disclosure that talks about shoreline access.
Okay, let me see if I've got this now. Okay. Okay, so this is the wording from the law. So this is all of the sales disclosures have been updated. This change has been sent to all the forms vendors. As you might imagine, they're pretty backed up right now with making changes for August 14th or August 17th and other parts of the country, the antitrust compliance issues. But at any rate, these were all sent to the forms vendors last week. And so this is the change you're going to see. Most of this is verbatim from the law that Susan was just telling you about. And then we have a few questions in here about, does the seller have any knowledge of public rights of way relating to shoreline access? So that would be if the seller's aware, they don't have to go research anything, which is another thing I want to give the Government Affairs Committee credit for, because initially, besides the separate disclosure Susan was talking about, initially they wanted the landlord to have to go and search for all these permits and essentially do a title search to look and see if there are like easements running across the property, public rights of way, and look at even neighboring property. So that's another reason to really appreciate the hard work of, I'm sure you will as well, of the Government Affairs Committee. So most of these the rest of these are really, what does the seller have in his or her possession? Does the seller have a copy of documentation of public rights of way? Does the seller know or have copies of any permits from the Coastal Resources Management Council relating to the property? So this is really going back to our regular standard, which is, does the seller know? Does the seller have actual knowledge? So watch for this change. Like I said, almost all of it is taken exactly out of the new law. And this is one of those ones that already went into effect. And what I meant to ask Susan before was when Susan was mentioning upon passage, upon passage is when the governor signs, right? Or if it goes in effect when the governor doesn't sign it.
Right.
So it's like the second it goes, right? Go ahead, Susan.
Right. So the governor doesn't have to sign the legislation necessarily. If he does nothing, it still passes. And that's, the end of the session. That's it. If he signs it, sometimes that's a political move too. It's like, I'm going to sign it. And when you go into that Legiscan website, it actually shows you when the governor signed it, or if it was just passed without a signature. So again, it's subject to being passed, and he'll sign all that paperwork within a couple of days of the session ending. So, we usually say by the end of June, if it's effective immediately, it's effective.
Susan, it looks like Bev just addressed it. We had a question in chat about, please type the name of the site that shows the progress of legislative bills.
So LEGISCAN, so Legi, like legislator, legiscan.com.
Okay, legiscan.com. Okay. All right. I think I've stopped sharing my screen, so
Okay, it's still there.
please go right ahead, Susan.
Okay, so the next thing, if we don't have any questions about the shoreline, this was a big topic last year. How to define that. There was a committee that was set up by the legislator that we actually had 2 seats at that table. And again, that's what they came up with. We'll see if it gets challenged in court now. Short-term rentals, every year there's a lot of short-term rental legislation that's introduced. There wasn't that much passed this year, but what was passed was, so last year you had to register your short-term rental. And when you register your short-term rental, you get a registration number and you get a valid date as to when it's valid till. So the law this year that was added to that, passed the law, requires the hosting platforms that offer short-term rentals for tourist or transient use to disclose on the listing the current valid registration number and its expiration date. What did not pass for short-term rentals was they wanted to pass on a state hotel tax for the short-term rentals, which would have been an additional tax. I think it was 7% on all the short-term rental income. That did not pass. I expect we're going to see that again next year or something like that. And the also one that did not pass, they wanted to consider the short-term rentals to be classified as Class 2 properties for taxation purposes, and that Class 2 properties are commercial properties. So that also did not pass. Again, I think we're going to see both of those again next year in a different format. And this is what happens lots of times. It doesn't pass this year. It's either put up for further discussion or further study, or we see it again next year. So we'll be looking on for that one. Another one that did not pass that we worked really hard on, and we did have a call to action on this one, was the radon bill. What they want, and this was done very late in the session, like after all the bills are usually introduced, and this was introduced by the Senate president. And we're not sure why the Senate president passes. He's been sick most of the session. He does have cancer. He does, I think he blames radon for his cancer. So he was very adamant about this bill. And it would have required a mandatory radon test 1 year prior to a closing date. And it would have to be paid for by the seller, and it would have to be mitigated by the seller. So we went and testified multiple times on this, saying, especially this past year, we've had some houses sell, with good or not, without any inspections. That would have definitely put a wrench into that. Also, there are some people that, they're not going to test for radon. It would have to be a radon test done by a certified radon inspector, not a Home Depot test. So we just saw that this was going to create a lot of problems in terms of time. There's only, I think, 18 radon inspectors in the state. Again, another thing that we just don't have the manpower for. This is one of the bills that we actually called upon Representative Sicarchi, the Speaker of the House, to help us with. And I think he gave up a couple of his bills for this bill. So this was a success. This did not pass. I think this is going to come back again. Again, this is one of those political footballs. They were using it for whatever purposes, but this one's definitely, I think, going to come back. So we're going to keep watching that one. Independent contractor status. This comes in every single year about independent contractor. Several of the bills that were introduced did not pass. The one that did pass amends the current law on workers' compensation to require anyone considered to be an independent contractor to file annually with the Director of Labor and Training. So every January, you're supposed to, as independent contractors, you're supposed to register with the Department of Labor and Training. Not sure if most of you do that, but you're supposed to be doing that. That is effective immediately. We're going to try to get, again, this is what we've tried to do this year too, is get a carving out for real estate agents with a definition of independent contractors for real estate agents. We'll continue to work on that one. There are several.
I'm sorry, may I just pop in and just backtrack for a second? Sure. I just want to give the Government Affairs Committee and the advocacy team so much credit for that radon bill. I have to say, usually I'm not looking much at legislation until towards the end of the session when it starts turning into law and figure out what do we need to work on, and what do we need to educate you on. That radon one, I mean, that was down. If this were a movie, it would be like one of those scenes where people are like racing down the hallway and texting each other and all of that, because it literally came down to the very last day of the legislative session. And I know our former government affairs director thought for certain it had passed, it looked inevitable. All of a sudden I was checking an update while he was at the State House. I saw that and said, it looks like it died in committee. I texted him and said, yeah, it's done. So it was just really, I know
That
I'm a
was-
nerd, so I like this stuff, but I thought that was really exciting that, especially with the Senate president saying, you know, if you want anything out of the Senate, you better get this passed. So that was incredible and a great success.
And this is one of the things we really would like to stress is get to know your representative, your senator, because it really matters. I mean, I was sitting outside Joe Sicarchi's office for an hour that afternoon. Joe happens to be a friend of mine. I've had fundraisers for him, and he was like, Susan, I can't do anything. You're going to have to go to the governor after, because it's going to pass. It's going to pass. And he called me and he said, guess what? We got it to just die in committee. It was an amazing feat. But like I said, I think we're going to see it again. But again, we need your help. So if you have any of your representatives, you know, submitting these bills, or if you can, when it comes down to the vote on the floor, if you're in their ear saying, please don't vote for this. This is really a dumb bill. You know, we can do better. So again, if you get anything out of this session today, is please get to know your representative and our senator, because it really matters. So, all right. Anybody else on that radon bill? So tax bills. There were a bunch of tax bills this year. So the conveyance tax is always something that comes up. That, you know, they pass a lot of bills that need money to carry through, and there's no money, so they always think, let's put it on the real estate, let's have a conveyance tax. So just a little background, I'm sure you all know this, but currently we have our conveyance taxes $4.60 per thousand if a house is sold up to $750,000. After the $750,000, it goes to $9.20 per million. I mean per thousand, excuse me. So the bill that was introduced would increase the conveyance tax for residential properties sold above $2 million to a rate of $6.60 per thousand. And then there was another one that was going to allow municipalities to set their own conveyance tax rate. That sounds interesting. For residential properties sold more than $800,000 at $20 per thousand. So they were going to allow the individual municipalities to set their own conveyance tax rate, which was in addition to the state conveyance tax rate, to $20 per thousand. That luckily got defeated. Another tax bill would allow municipalities to collect municipal fines, like a speeding ticket, by including the fines on the property tax bill. So they wanted, you know, if you got a fine in the city of Providence for parking, and you had a lot of parking tickets, they would put that on your property tax bill. That got defeated, luckily. There was another one. Oh, they wanted a new tax on gains from a sale or exchange of property that was held for 6 years or less. So if you had your house for less than 6 years, they wanted a new tax called I guess a super, you know, holding property less than 6 years, you get a new tax on that. That was defeated. So again, some of these bills are just like, you look at them, you're like, who's thinking about, like, really? Like, who's submitting them? And a lot of times they're submitted, you know, the legislator is doing somebody a favor, or one of their constituents is asking them to pass it, and that's why they're submitting it. Half the time they're not even reading them. So miscellaneous. This is effective immediately. I'm not sure it really affects us that much, except that we do use public stuff often. So this act removes the basement area from the calculation of floor area ratios for the zoning ordinance. So if you go like for the city of Warwick and you're looking up a raised ranch, for example, and the city of Warwick says there's 1,200 square feet on the main level. Right now, it'll say there's 1,200 square feet on the lower level. That is going to be eliminated now. Not sure why they did that. I don't know what the background of this was, but that did pass, and that's immediate. Again, how long it's going to take for the city and towns to catch up with that is anyone's guess. Reevaluations. This one did not pass. It would have placed a 20% cap on increase in revaluations that are consecutive. It would have been a 20% cap on that. It sounded like a good bill. Again, if you want to take a look at that bill and you think it's a good bill and you want to talk to the sponsors, call them up and say, hey, it was a great bill, try it again. Tax credit This one also is a decent bill that did not pass. It would have allowed property owners a one-time non-refundable tax credit for the actual cost of connecting a single-family or a multifamily home to a municipal sewer system. So if you paid $12,000 to have your house connected to a sewer system, they would give you a tax credit for that on your personal or corporate tax. Again, that failed. I think those are one of the ones that we were supporting, not strongly supporting, but supporting. Might be an interesting one to see if it comes back.
Susan, if we actually have two questions on the bill before this, you're talking about with the square footage. And for those of you who have somehow never met Susan Martins-Phipps before, she's also an appraiser. She wears many hats. So we've got two square, and tell me if I'm interrupting you to
No, please.
take. Okay. So the first question is, does that relate to the total living square footage?
So, this has always been a problem when, like, sometimes agents will include the lower level of, say, of raised ranch, which is very livable as a lower level. They'll include it in their square footage, and towns do the same thing. Sometimes they're taxed equally, sometimes they're taxed as lower levels, which is a different tax. But this is going to eliminate anything that's a lower level, and a lower level, or a basement area, I should say, basement. And basement is defined as anything. So if you have a raised ranch that three quarters of it is above grade, that's still considered a basement. If there's any bit of it below grade, it's considered a basement. Why this act was passed, I don't know why it was even introduced. Maybe it was causing confusion with how much the living area really is. So right now, according to this law, you're going to see the living area as just anything that's above grade. And I don't know why they did it. Does that answer your question?
I think you just answered this one too, but I'll just repeat it just in case. So does basement square footage now get included in square footage?
No, it does the exact opposite. It's not included.
Okay, and then I think the reaction that we have in the Q&A is, what? So I think you have the same reaction too, Susan, right?
Sometimes we get this legislation and that's what we say. We're sitting around the table and we go, what? Like, do they actually read this? Like, why? And, David was great at getting like the background story, like, whatever the background story is. I never got the background story on this one. I don't know why they did it. I'm thinking that maybe it is a taxation thing, that they don't want to tax basements, but, finished basements are critical, and they're critical, they're valuable, and people pay for them. So I'm not sure how this is this is effective immediately. So I'm very anxious to see if anyone is doing anything about this on the municipality level. We'll see if this has any ground.
And Susan, if I could just address a couple other really quick things. So one of the questions we have is, can we get an email with all the links provided? Yeah, we can put that together, because I know we're between Bev and me, we're posting a lot of links in the Q&A, and I know you're trying to listen to Susan and not have to keep going back and forth to different links. So yes, we could compile those. We had a question at the very start about how do I get mobile alerts? And so there are some links that were in the chat, but the most current one, I'd actually reached out to Trevor Chase, our new our new government affairs director. And so if any of you have your mobile phone handy right this second, you can type text realtors to 30644. And instead of my repeating that and taking away Susan's time, you can look in the Q&A, or we can send that out. And boy, Susan, that last bill you're talking about is really prompting questions. I think you were just talking about split levels, but the question is, how about split levels?
So again, anything that's below grade is considered basement. So on a split level, as you know, you walk in and there's one level, and then you walk down and there's another level. Some of the split levels are completely above grade, where you can walk around the whole house and everything is above grade. Even if there's a window, and if there's ground beneath that window, that's considered below grade. So, and that's considered a basement. So again, I have not seen this bill in action yet, and we'll see how they handle it. But this act removes the basement area from the calculation of floor area ratios in relation to the provisions that a zoning ordinance may address. I'm reading that. So we'll see how that works out. Again, I think this is one of those that is probably not going to, they passed it, and I think it's going to, I don't know, kind of die in implementation, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it doesn't make any sense as to why they were prompted to do this.
I think we're all caught up with questions for now. So if you can please continue with your flow, and I'll try not to butt in every 2
Oh,
seconds.
no, actually, I'm actually nearing
Oh.
the end of what we've been discussing. I have one other, again, dumb one. And some of these, you just have to laugh at some of these laws. They're just like, what? They have nothing else to do but create legislation. There's so much legislation that was introduced this year, and a lot of it was absurd. So
Susan,
this
I
one,
remember one, we do have one more square footage question for you, but I just have to say, I remember one from many, many years ago where a legislator was upset that AAA didn't come to change his tire within, he had to wait a couple of hours because one of those days where a lot of people, a lot of accidents, whatever going on. And so this legislator, who shall remain nameless because he's no longer in the legislature, filed legislation to require any kind of entity, you didn't use the words AAA because it couldn't have done that legally, but any kind of car like roadside assistance program would have had to have responded within a half an hour. Otherwise, they couldn't charge you. So it was like the dominoes for cars. And so people were just saying, well, why does he file legislation to say you get your pizza for free if you don't get it in a half an hour? So to me, that's probably the dumbest one I've seen, but you're monitoring these things more closely. So let's see if your next one is going to beat that, and then we'll go back to we can do the square footage
I
question.
just want to say, I mean, when the session starts next year in Jan, it's like, I think it's the Monday after the first of the year. Please come and join us. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to see like how ridiculous some of these things are. And then when you sit and you're waiting to give some testimony, and you hear everything else that's going on, and you hear the ridiculousness of some of these things, you can also, if you do any written testimony, you can see what other people have written. And some of it is, you just say, wow, 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 is all you can say. It's a part-time legislature, and wow. So this one, again, we just kind of, a lot of these we shake our heads and say, what? This one was a multifamily home right of first refusal. And this one did not pass. And it would have granted a right of first refusal to nonprofits for the purchase of multifamily residential properties to create affordable housing. This one was, again, I think the intent, lots of times the intent of these bills is great. And, we have a shortage of housing, all housing. And they were trying to come up with creative ways to help the situation, but some of them just didn't make any sense. This one did not make any sense. This was not passed. One good thing is if an agent changes brokers, there was a $25 fee that was included on that. That fee is now gone away. That was the governor's proposal. So that was a good thing that I guess passed. That's effective immediately. So if you're going to change brokers, you don't have to pay that $25 fee anymore. So, again, continuing just because the session is over, our work as a committee isn't over. We really have to go through these bills to see, as I said, some of these are definitely going to come back at us, and we want to get them quickly. We'd like to invite some of these legislators into the, RIR building to meet with our committee to say, listen, this is why we were opposed. And if you're going to reintroduce this, can we help you? Can we, talk about ways that would make it acceptable or make more sense to us, and we can help you in that way. So we're going to be continuing to work on the independent contractor status, again, just by clarifying what an independent contractor is. And, there are certain definitions of an independent contractor by tax law, by all kinds of different laws. So we want them to basically carve out the real estate agent from this bill, because the intent of the bill was really, and when we talked to the senator who introduced this, he was like, it's for the landscaper who gets paid by the hour and should have different benefits. And it's like, okay, this sounds great, but it really doesn't apply to agents, and agents are going to be caught in the crossfire of this one. So we'll continue to work on that bill. Again, we'll continue to work on the electrician's bill to define what home inspectors' legal and regulatory responsibilities are during a home inspection. We're expecting radon to come back. That radon bill, it would be the only one in the country that has that kind of a requirement. So, and we kept pressing that, saying that, but they didn't really care about that, but it didn't pass, so that's a good thing. There's also, Monica, do you know much about the first time home buyer savings account? I know that RIR has been working on this for several different sessions. And it would basically be allowing people to save money in a specific account for a purchase of a first home. This has been introduced several years in a row. I think this is going to be introduced again. It is something that the realtors have supported. Again, we'll be seeing that. Does anybody have any questions about any of the legislation or any of the process, or would like to volunteer? Because
do
we
have a
need, I
comment.
mean, it would be nice to, like, when we have, especially at the end of the session, when our whole committee was at the State House running from room to room to testify on different things, just because there were so many ridiculous bills or so many bills that we needed to support. So, on a couple of occasions, we were testifying on a couple of different bills at the same time. So we would love to have an army available to say, hey, please call me and I'll be happy to just stand there with you, because in numbers, it's always an interesting thing. So I am going to see if I can get into the question and answer, see if there's any other questions that I can answer quickly.
Oh, we have a volunteer already.
Yes, Trisha, please contact me. I can give you my phone number, 401-265-8493. If you have any questions about what happened in the legislation this year, if I can't answer it, I can find out answers for you. And again, like I said, if you do want to help, please help. The other thing is each board has a government affairs committee. So on our government affairs committee, we have a member of each board, and it's usually a person from that government affairs committee, and they give us a report as to what's going on in their area. So if you want to get involved on even a local level, we need people on the local level, going to the town council meetings, going to, the zoning hearings, going to just to keep us informed. And if you ever need help from us as the state committee, we would be happy to help you out as well on that. So if you don't get anything, thank you, Shannon. Shannon wants to get involved too. Thank you. If you have any inkling to help out with this, because this is what your realtor dollars really goes for, both on the state level, the local level, and the national level. This is what we have a huge lobbying group in Washington, which Monica can tell you works very, very hard at a lot of different things. But on the state level, we have calls to action. We have an RPAC trustee committee, which we have several trustee committee members on our committee. And this is where we decide who's going to get money in this coming election. Like, we're going to be supporting them. And they pay attention to that. We pay them, we get some money, we give them some money, we maybe host something for them, and they respond to us. So basically sign up for the Realtor Party alerts, realtorparty.realtor. Talk, call, email, text your reps and senators, get to know them. And again, if you have never done this before, I encourage you to find out who they are. Send them a letter saying, hey, listen, I'm in your district, I'm a realtor, and I pay attention. And usually they'll send a letter back to you. Respond to calls to action.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I speak very quickly. I'm sorry.
No, I do too. That's why I'm trying not to interrupt you. I just have another volunteer opportunity once you're done with your list. So like immediate volunteer opportunities. So
great. Stay informed. Like, that legislative tracker is right when you go onto the website, the RI website. It's right there. All you have to do is click on a couple of things. I don't know, Bev, if you can show them how to do that. If you can get on and share your screen on how to do that. That legislative tracker, I told you, it has what the bill number is, who's supporting it, who's sponsoring it. Call us with any questions. Call Trevor. I'm volunteering you already. Trevor is our analyst, and he's going to be there, and he's going to be able to answer the questions too. So if you have any questions, call the staff and call us. Submit written testimony. Now, if we have a group of people who are willing to volunteer and also willing to submit, written testimony, very, very helpful. And this is what Representative Sikachi is constantly telling me. It's like, get your people here, get your people sitting here, get your people, shaking hands, writing letters, submitting testimony, because the more they hear from us, the better it is. And volunteer to help us. So Monica, I didn't mean to
add to the volunteer opportunity. Since Trevor, our government affairs director, just started last week. So we didn't want to stick him on the panel like, right after he got started here. However, he's been busy behind the scenes. And one thing that he was just telling me about the other day, in fact, we were just discussing this morning, was a proposed ordinance in Providence. And so those of you who live in Providence, I think will be, or do business there, I think will be very interested, as will your clients, because I'm giving Trevor full credit for this because he's putting together some testimony on behalf of the association. And I'm sure could use your assistance too, if you want to contract your city councilors. But what it is if the property owner doesn't live in the property, they have to have a property manager give that name to the city of Providence. Now, there's some laws that are similar in effect already. However, this one, the penalty that Trevor showed me would be a maximum of $500 per day. $500 per day if you don't register the name, contact information of a property manager for your property if you don't live in it. There are more details than that I'm sure he'll be putting out, but just want to make you aware that that's something right now. And it just shows what Susan was just telling you. I mean, how important it is at the local level to get involved too. Because a lot of the ideas, you have one town that has a bad idea, and then other people start going, oh yeah, maybe we'll do that too. Or maybe and sometimes to do what they're trying to do, they need authority from the General Assembly. So the more we can nip these things in the bud, the better off. And you don't have to be a professional speaker or anything like that. It's just more what Susan's done, like making contacts with people, knowing who your officials are. So, yep. And so Susan, we had, get back to you, but we had, Jennifer had the question, is this being recorded? And is there a link? Yes. Did Beverly already answer that? Yes, this is being recorded. And then we'll be sending out the link. Our communications department, I believe, will send out the link. If not today, it'd be early next week. And we'll also post it on rirealtors.org. And then another housekeeping issue before we go back to you, Susan, is will the answers to questions that were answered live be available afterward? We can put something together. I think probably, Susan, a lot of the square footage questions we did answer live. So that seemed to be an area that sparked a lot of questions and comments.
And I think that's also an area that we're going to have to give you updates, because lots of times when legislation is passed, we don't quite understand how it's going to actually end up looking like. So we'll keep you informed on that as to what the cities and towns do with that, how they're using it, why they're using it, and if in fact it's going to affect us at all. So we'll keep you informed. So keep going onto that website, and we'll keep you informed as much as we can.
So we have a couple of questions. One is, can the owner be listed as the property owner? I'm going to defer, even though Trevor he's listening to us today, but he's not a panelist, but he's going through that ordinance. So I'm going to defer to him, and we'll take a closer look at that. But we'll make sure to put out some information publicly, on the website about what's happening in Providence. And then Michelle comments that Westerly already has that for short-term rentals.
Right.
Yeah, I think, different towns and cities have registration requirements, but I'm hoping Westerly isn't quite that bad or isn't worse for penalties. Because $500 a day, I don't even think you could be a slumlord. I don't even think you get fined that much a day unless it's a second or third offense. And this is just because you haven't filed someone's name with the town. Anyway.
So, most of the towns have that already. I know that I'm the rental agent for several properties that I rent, rent for people. The interesting thing is if you don't have a rental agent that's registered with the city, so I give them, my office number, everything. So I've never been called as a result of that. But if the tenant decides to say, hey, I didn't have a rental agent, they can stop payment on their rent. So there's a lot of ramifications to that. So if you do rent something and you are a rental agent, at least inform your clients. Get informed on that. That's been on the books for a while, at least 10 years in Warwick, I know. So again, there's ramifications to that. And that's why it's really important to keep informed, because some of these things just slide through and you don't even know that they're there. But that rental agent has been around for a while in Warwick, I know.
I know we have another follow-up question about that Providence ordinance. I'll be honest with you, I just know enough to be dangerous, and I was so inspired that by what Susan had to say about volunteer opportunities. I just wanted to make sure to let people know that Trevor's working on that now. I don't recall, the $500 a day is what really jumped out at me, but he's the one who would have the most information about other details. So we'll make sure, well, I know we have a newsletter coming out early next week. So let's see if we can work with Trevor to get his first byline in our newsletter. Yay. Anyway. And then Susan, here's one. I don't know if you want to put your former lead inspector hat back on for this one. But the question is, do lead inspections need to be done on apartment style condos totally gutted after the 2010 flood? So these are gutted condos.
So what was the year, what's the original date of, the question is, what's the original date of construction? Because that's what it is. It's the original date of construction. Because if you had something that was built, say, in 1950, and it was totally gutted and it was totally renovated in 2023, say, you still have, there's still construction materials there. There's still a lot of things there that can produce lead. And, you know, it's one of the things, it's like, even as a lead inspector, I would go in and the building had been completely renovated and I found lead. And it's, you know, lead dust is what we're testing for, and lead dust, and it's really hard to get rid of lead dust. So if you are doing renovations, which is why, you know, it's important to have somebody who knows what they're doing, that lead dust is scattered everywhere. And the cleanup process is pretty arduous. So if you have a building that was built prior to 1978, where lead was any part of the construction process, even if it's renovated, it's still going, if the original date of building is prior to 1978, it still has to be inspected.
Perfect. Susan, I think you've done this all in record time. Just looking to see if we have any. Oh, okay. This one is one, actually, I think one for me, which is, where can we get the updated forms for the new buyer representation situation on August 17th? First of all, in Rhode Island, it's August 14th instead of, most of the country is using August 17th for the day to remove compensation fields from the multiple listing service. The reason that our MLS folks decided to pick August 14th is it's a weekday, where the 17th is a Saturday. So we wanted to make sure that we had staff available to answer questions. If you go to rirealtors.org, and I can post that in the chat. I know there's a shorter one that our communications director is going to smack me for, because I keep forgetting the shorter version and I know I'm going to botch it. So I'll just do it the way I know how to find it. But you'll find on our website, you'll find the excerpts that actually show a list of all the forms that are changing, along with some new forms for rental agents that they can choose to use if they wish. And then there's, oh, good. Oh, Bev did it. Yay. Okay. Bev put the correct link in chat. Thank you, Bev. Phew. Okay. So what you'll find in that, the list of the forms, you'll also find the actual language, not the entire form, but the actual language that's changing, along with explanations. So you can find that right now, buyer representation agreement, listing contract, purchase and sales agreement. We do have a blast email going out next week, early next week, with even more details and a message from our president, Sally Hersey, who spoke earlier. So stay tuned for that. But any questions you have in the meantime, feel free to contact me. I know that Ann Enos, our Director of Professional Development, has had a wonderful brainstorm about judging from how active you've been today with all of your questions and participation. I know she had some ideas about a government affairs class. So Susan, I didn't know if you wanted to make any closing comments first before we call on Ann, but we've got about just under 10 minutes left.
If I could, we do have a couple of minutes, and I would like to thank the committee, because again, this is the kind of committee that it's just not once a month or once every 2 months. It's all the time. And we expect them to be reading the newspaper and coming up with ideas for new legislation or ideas of how we can help out. So starting in alphabetical order, Agata Del Borgo from Providence. She's also the FPC for our new Congressman Gabe Amos. Paul Harrison, who's on the Commercial Appraisal Board, Jennifer Hilton, who is the chair of RPAC trustees. She's from the Tiverton area, David Iannicelli from East Greenwich, myself from Warwick. I'm on the Providence Board and the Kent County Board. Mike Meter from the Kent County Board, Kelly Moran from the Newport Board, Alex Parmenides from the Providence Board, Stephen Perino from the Providence Board, Ted Reedy, who is an attorney who is invaluable to us because he can sometimes read this language, which is sometimes ridiculous. Noel Shiland from Newport, Rita Daniel Steels, who is the FPC for Magaziner. Also, Jennifer Hilton is the FPC for Senator Whitehouse. Chris Whitten, who is our vice president for RIAR, and he's from the Northern Board, and he's the FPC for Senator Reed. And then Sally Hersey, who's the president, who obviously you heard spoke. She is on as the ex officio member as president, and it's great because she's been at almost all our meetings, and she understands because she's there what's going on, and she has like a different perspective. She's like lives in Cranston and she lives in Narragansett, so she can give us a really interesting perspective on both. So I really want to thank them. I also want to thank David Salvatore, who was amazing, and I'm very anxious to work with Trevor because I think he's going to be amazing too. And the staff, Monica Staaf, thank you so much, and everyone who's been helping out, Anne and Carrie, who's been picking up the slack, and Bev, thank you so much. Because without the staff of RIAR, we couldn't do anything. So I appreciate it. And you guys really, you help support us and you help our jobs more interesting.
You shared a wealth of information, Susan. So, but don't go away yet, because I want to have, let's call on Anne, because you may want to contribute to part of what Anne's update is. Anne, go right
Hi,
ahead.
everyone. Nice to see you, and thank you so much for participating. We had over 160 people attend this session, so I think it was of huge value to you as a member, but also for us to see your feedback. And that's kind of like where I come into the conversation. I can't believe how much I've learned today. And I'm kind of on the peripheral of government affairs because typically it affects legislation that affects education and professional development. So as far as professional development is concerned, I wonder if there would be any interest from you, our members, to maybe have like a roundtable discussion. We haven't talked about this, Susan, but you mentioned all the committee members that represent the field. I wonder if we could have, like a roundtable discussion with all of your committee members and have our members join you to get more details with the lay of the land, because today we've seen that people are interested in this. And I think it behooves us to share information more than cram all that we did into this one valuable webinar. And this, if I'm not mistaken, based on what you said, the next session will probably have more of the same and other proposed legislation that could have a direct negative or positive impact on what we do in the field. So that's number one, a very informal Q&A, with committee members that want to discuss further, with our general population, if I can kind of use that expression. Probably not the best, but that's what I've got right now. The other thing that I'm really interested in is some feedback. If our members would like us to kind of pull all the elements together about what is government in Rhode Island, maybe on a state level, a local level, the 39 municipalities, maybe by county, throw in national, how national legislation trickles down to us in the field, but stress on advocacy. Because if you look at life, at the federal level, some of the things, some of the legislation that keeps ongoing is the 1031 exchange. What would happen, to our investors if that piece of legislation was nixed? What would happen if independent contractor relationship disappeared? That's at the national level. Break it down to the state level, which is what Susan has kindly done, and Monica too. Thank you, Monica, always. Thank you. But what about the municipal level? And I think there's content there, but I would love to see us create Government 101 that would introduce us and give us a better idea, because you're the voice of the people in the field. When you look at, what we do as a real estate licensee, and housing is critical. Everyone's got to live somewhere. And now that covers many shapes and sizes. We'll be sending out a survey shortly, and I hope that will be one of the questions. And please participate, because from my perspective, I can only serve you better if I know what the need is. And I'm not in the field anymore. I've got a decent idea, but your input is critical to what we do in professional development. So on that note, I'll turn it back to Monica and Susan, if there are any other.
And you're getting some love already here. You're already getting some great ideas. People thinking this is a great idea, wonderful idea in the Q&A. So yeah, so please watch for that survey. I want to make sure that we thank Susan Martins-Phipps.
Welcome.
This fantastic presentation. I mean, I learned some new things too, and I sit right next door to our government affairs team, so team of one. So I just can't thank you enough. If any of you, this has prompted a little bit, but if any of you want to send a reaction, send Susan some love, that would be
Not
great.
necessary. That's what I have
It
a dog
is.
for. I have a huge dog sitting right by me. She gives me
So
I
love.
can't do it because I'm a co-host, so I can't do it on mine.
I
but-
just want to make sure you know, Susan, that I realized a little while ago when Sally left that the reactions are not active. So it's not that
Oh.
nobody loves you. It's that they can't find the reactions. So thank you very much. You were fabulous. I'm
No,
going to give
thank
you.
you. Thank you. I'm such a nerd. I love this stuff. So it's fun to do it. So I really enjoy it.
Well,
Thank you
on
very
that-
much.
On that note, I want to thank everyone, and wow, we're even slightly ahead of schedule. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy days to join us today.